So, a quick demonstration now for you on bullet pointing and planning your story. So, I've given you the task for tomorrow to look through just so that you understand what the expectation is, what you're going to be writing. But I just want you to focus on the planning today. You need to plan this really thoroughly because although you'll be writing an ending, because the book is split into parts, the ending in itself is almost a whole story. So, let's have a think about the introduction. I'm doing the introduction because we're all working on the same introduction, so this should apply to everyone. For your introduction, you need to use the pages that I gave you yesterday, so that's where your key points are coming from. Then the rest of the story is yours to do what you want with. So from those pages, I would say that there are 4 key points, which seems like quite a small amount given the number of pages you had to read. But then from those pages, once you've got your 4 key points, you can start planning your adverbials, your figurative language, your relative clauses. So it's not all wasted text, and I really advise that you use the information on those pages to help you with all the other aspects of planning, not just the key points. So I actually thought that whole 45 is the first key point that we come across in the story. So whole 45 is a key point because the character talks about how it's notoriously the hardest. Whole 45. Then the next key point is Zero refuses to dig. Then you've got hits. I'm not even putting 0, I'm keeping it really brief. Hits Mr. Pendanski. And then you've got 0 leaving the camp, and that is it. That's the main point, so that's your introduction. And now I'm going to think about figurative language, then adverbials, then relative clauses. And I'm going to do one of each for my introduction. I may end up including more when I start writing, but if I've planned at least one of each, then I know that in that paragraph there, or in the 2 paragraphs I write for the introduction, I've ticked all of the boxes for my success criteria. So the first is figurative language or powerful adjectives. I am actually going to try and be clever here and use some personification when talking about the whole, and I've decided to use, again, I'm just planning, so I'm not going to write the full sentence, but I'm going to try and use some personification for the whole. So I've put the idea, put up a good fight. So when I'm writing my story tomorrow, in some way I'm going to talk about how the whole put up a good fight. I'm going to personify the whole and make a really big deal out of how monumental this point is for Stanley, the character. Then I need to think about adverbials. So adverbials can be used to link paragraphs. You can use fronted adverbials, or they can be used sort of within a paragraph, linking sentences for a bit of cohesion. So I'm going to go for, because this is quite a key point, a fronted adverbial here to link my next bullet point. So I'm going to go from hits Mr. Pendanski. When I'm writing, I will obviously add more detail. This is just notes, but as Stanley lifted his gaze, comma. That's my fronted adverbial. I'm not sure how I'm going to slot it in yet, but that's how I'm going to link into the next idea that Stanley looks up and sees 0 leaving the camp. And then I need a relative clause. So I've been thinking quite hard about this. I think around the same time we talk about hitting Mr. Pendanski, I'm going to talk about the spade that he uses to hit him. And I thought, oh, well, I could add extra information about the spade there. I can use one of my relative pronouns to put a relative clause into that sentence, which is what you're working on today. Actually, in your grammar task, you'll be looking at relative clauses within sentences. So I'm going to put it in front of my bullet point. In fact, I'm going to move this. I have the benefit that I'm working on a computer so I can cut and paste things, but it's just a plan. So if you're working on paper, cross out, scribble, as long as you can still read it, whatever works for you. So, as Stanley lifted his gaze, hits Mr. Pendanski. This is where I'm going for my relative clause. Right. And I've done a lot of talking. It's going to be very simple. That glinted in the midday sun. That's my relative clause. I've put it in brackets for now, but I can use commas when I'm writing it tomorrow, however I want to. So I've got my 4 key bullet points for my introduction. Hole 45, Zero refuses to dig, hits Mr. Pendanski, Zero leaves camp. I've planned some figurative language, so put up a good fight. I'm going to try and get some personification in my story tomorrow. I've planned adverbials. I've gone for a fronted adverbial in between my last 2 key points as Stanley lifted his gaze. And I've also got a relative clause that glinted in the midday sun. Now I'm going to insert that into the middle of a sentence when I talk about Zero picking up his shovel. That's how it should look when you're planning as well, unless you've chosen a slightly different format, but the same rules apply. Get the key points in, then think about your adjectives, figurative language, adverbial phrases, relative clauses, but make them meaningful.